Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Now this one's coming slightly out of left field and some baffling parts of it, but we'll come to that. So as you can see here on screen, so the WBA has reinstated Mahmoud Charr, formerly known as Mahmoud Charr, as its regular champion. So that's a position Daniel Dubois most recently vacated when he lost to Alexander Usyk. So what we'll do is we'll go through this resolution because he's also been ordered to face Jarrell Miller. So that's come slightly out of left field because what's he done to deserve a shot at a secondary heavyweight title? But let's get to the resolution. So as part of a court settlement, the World Boxing Association Championships Committee has reinstated Mahmoud Charr as regular champion of the organization's heavyweight division. The agreement reached, which puts an end to a long dispute by the boxer and his team, will allow the WBA to close this chapter, settling a dispute that has been going on for more than a year. And we'll come to that background. After the fight in which Alexander Usyk defeated Daniel Dubois, the Ukrainian had remained as the only heavyweight champion. However, the organization is forced to make the decision to reinstate Charr as regular champion in order to continue with the normal operation of the body. Charr lost his status as champion in recess in December 2021 after not having fought in the scheduled time and after the impossibility of agreeing a fight with Trevor Bryan. After 2 years and a judicial process in between, the WBA has decided to reinstate the regular champion status to the boxer. After a thorough study by the WBA on the best way to execute this move, the WBA has set two key conditions. First, Charr must face Jarrell Miller, 5th rated boxer of the division, before October 14. And what are we now? September, so that's not far away. And second, the winner of this matchup must face the next available contender, which will be determined by the body. The judicial agreement constitutes a temporary decision of the organisation which has been taken in the best spirit of overcoming a difference that prevented the WBA from moving forward in its plans. For the time being, such a juncture only delays the institution's purpose of having only one champion per category. However, far from abandoning the path, the Pioneer organisation will continue to work resolutely to achieve this goal, with the framework of its only one champion policy, which to date has 70% been achieved, with 12 single champions in 17 categories. The WBA works in favour of boxing worldwide to make decisions that favour the sport. Can't see how this one favours the sport, but that's not what it's really about. So, if you can't remember exactly what happened, why Mahmoud Charr was put to be champion in recess and then ultimately dumped, it was a situation where he was trying to make a fight with Trevor Bryan. There was a purse bid, actually 2 years running. And both times, Charr said that Don King and his organisation were effectively making it hard for him to get a visa. And he blamed King and Co. for not being able to get into the country to face Trevor Bryan. As we know, Trevor Bryan ultimately went on to face, I think it was that first year, Jonathan Goudry, and he was elevated to champion. And then later on, Daniel Dubois fought Trevor Bryan, and that was a bit murky. Remember, King wanted to withhold some of Dubois' purse over some sort of historical debt that he believed Frank Warren owed him. Anyway, so Dubois absolutely beat up Trevor Bryan, and ultimately, with this whole sort of goal to get to one belt, there was a WBA mandatory, which was Dubois to Usyk. So the timing of this seems to be that now that there is a vacant belt, as it were, the WBA has just decided, well, this is the way that we can actually, close this court action. I think what we need to read from this is the fact that Mahmoud Charr has been pursuing them in court and has been bleeding them of money to fight an action which he probably had a pretty good case in. The whole thing with King and all that was a little bit flimsy, and they sort of dumped him out, champion recess, and all of a sudden he was nothing. So the whole situation was pretty murky. At the time, I thought that he had a case, and ultimately the WBA must have been getting tied up in red tape, getting bled dry in terms of money, and as it says, it needed to resume the normal operation of the body. Effectively, they couldn't afford to continue to pay legal fees and fight this. Because who knows, if they hadn't reached a resolution, how long this would have gone on. And also, if it had have gone to some sort of court and been found against them, who knows what would have been ruled against them and what they would have been ordered to do, etc. But I think we can say that Mahmoud Charr has used his resources wisely here to try to get back what he believed was his. So the WBA has ultimately, now that the belt has caved, they've reached this. I mean, the settlement, maybe the draft part of it was probably in place for months, waiting for that pin to drop in terms of that belt to become vacant, as it were, again. And this was basically announced a week or so after the fight between Dubois and Usyk. So that's one portion of this. So Charr is now the regular champion again. But then you have these conditions that he now has to face Jarrell Miller. So let's look at the rankings. So you've got a situation with Deontay Wilder at 1, Martin Bakole at 2, Anthony Joshua at 3, Lenny Apero at 4, Jarrell Miller at 5. So Miller is at 5. Remembering, Miller is coming off, one of his multiple drug bans. He's coming back, making his comeback, all that sort of stuff, trying to be relevant, and this sort of puts him into the mix. Somehow he is getting a shot at a secondary world title. And how is that? Because when you look at the record, currently 26 wins, 1 draw. Since he's come back, he's fought Ariel Esteban Bracamonte. That was in 2022. That was his first fight back. Then he's fought Derek Cardenas. That was a small hall show in the United States. Then he fought Lucas Brown earlier this year. And actually, that was a pretty fun fight. But, you've got Bracamonte, Cardenas, and Brown. How does that put him in the path for a secondary title? Although you could argue, Daniel Dubois certainly didn't have a murderous road to get to number 1 and then ultimately the mandatory in the WBA. But what happened to the guys that are above Miller? You've got, let's face it, Wilder's probably not going to be interested. Joshua may not have been interested. But then again, if Joshua was going to have another sort of confidence-building fight, knocking out Mahmoud Charr would have been probably something Charr would have been gagging to do and be involved in a fight with Joshua, because the money on offer would have been bigger than he'll get for a Miller fight, that's for sure. But why didn't they not go down and it's Martin Bakole? Or, Lenny Apero. So he's a lesser-known heavyweight to most fans, but, he's a skilled heavyweight. He'd beat Mahmoud Charr, I have no doubt about that. But Jarrell Miller somehow is in the fray. The fact that he's at number 5 after the caliber of opposition that he's faced, that's also a question mark and a query, but now he's getting a shot at a secondary title that must be held in, basically, at the time of recording this video, within about 6 weeks or so. But not only that, then the winner of this matchup must face the next available contender, which will be determined by the body. And the fact that they've plucked Miller out, who knows who else they could. The fact that Ivan Dichko has turned up to a couple of their Say No to Drugs events in Argentina wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being the next guy. But, who knows? You've got Jonathan Goudry down there. He's been calling for another shot at the WBA secondary title after his loss to Trevor Bryan. You've got Agi Cabello, Luis Ortiz, Fabio Wardley, Gassiev. A lot of these guys would be interested in that sort of fight, especially if it was Charr holding the belt. I think even Miller, if Miller is clean, he is certainly a more beatable fighter. What we've seen of Jarrell Miller since he's come back has been, so-so. And I'm sure that Mahmoud Charr would certainly want to be having some pretty stringent and strict drug testing in place if he's having a fight with Jarrell Miller. I'm sure that, it would be a case, there'd be something. But then again, Charr has popped before himself back in 2018 when he was going to be facing Freza Kendo. And I know some people say that he was cleared of that situation, but the fact that he didn't have a representative present when they opened the B sample, it was a technicality that he got off on. You have a case where he did fail a test, and Miller's failed multiple tests. So, maybe there won't be much of anything in terms of testing in place for that fight if it gets made. And where's it going to happen? I'd assume Germany, but who knows? I don't think that Miller and his team have the significant pull and resources to put something on. We've seen Charr face Christopher Lovejoy in an event in Germany more recently. Let's face it as well, Mahmoud Charr, who is now 38 years old and has not been relevant for some considerable time, has not exactly been active either. The last 5 years, Alexander Ustinov, that's where he picked up the regular title, and then he didn't defend it for 4 or 5 years. You had him versus Christopher Lovejoy. That was kind of a hilarious kind of fight. Lovejoy basically got rolled in two, and then 2 tune-ups last year. And this is in a period where he didn't have the belt and he was fighting the WBA in court. I mean, he was, I think it was the Nikola Milicic one, he was describing himself still as the WBA champion. So Mahmoud Charr has now been reinstated, and we are going to have a fight, apparently, against Jarrell Miller. And let's face it, what's Miller doing? What's Miller really got going at the moment? Not much. 35 years old, not signed with one of the big promoters, no TV contract. He is with a mid-tier promoter in Dimitri Salita, but, I mean, Jarrell Miller, kind of with his recent antics, failing multiple tests, since 2018, he's kind of a little bit in the cold. So this is a gift opportunity, gift wrapped for Jarrell Miller. So you'd imagine he's going to take it. And I would say that Miller's a favourite, but a clean Miller, but then again, Charr's not really good. He's not really any good, so I mean, it's kind of a little bit weird and wacky, and sometimes in the heavyweight division, you get this. So what are we going to see? Will the fight happen? And then what happens after that? Because if they're being fair, I mean, someone like Martin Bacoli should be, if you're going next cab off the rank sort of stuff, I mean, arguably, he should have had that fight with Mahmoud Charr if anyone was going to have it, if Deontay Wilder was unavailable. Maybe he didn't want it. Maybe they turned it down. I don't know. But Miller getting a shot out of nowhere, it seems a little bit curious. I mean, is this brown envelope territory? Question mark. I'm not saying it is, but you have to wonder, after sort of having no way back in, all of a sudden just being given a real handout here, and an injection, as it were, to his career. Maybe a different injection to some of the other ones we've had in Miller's past. But this is, I mean, they talk about in the statement as well about wanting to get down to the one policy. If they really wanted that, wouldn't they just kind of give Mahmoud Charr, just sort of reinstate him as a mandatory, or order him to face Usyk or something like that? What they're going to be able to do from this is clip the ticket and get some fees. After all, these sanctioning bodies are about money and about, separating boxers from their money via sanctioning fees. Anyway, strange situation, left field to some extent, and Miller's going to get a shot at a secondary world title against Mahmoud Charr, who is kind of washed and was never really that relevant in recent years anyway. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.